Hey gang, it's Platt here with another Spirit Series video. Today we're going to talk about two different styles slash terms for whiskey. We're going to talk about bottle and bond slash straight whiskeys. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. We're going to talk about the difference. First, bottle and bond. Bottle and bond is a label for an American-made distilled beverage that follows a certain set of regulations set forth by the U.S. government. We get bottle and bond from the Bottle and Bond Act of 1897. It came in reaction to some of the adulterated spirits that were being sold at the time. Go back to history a little bit. The early days of our country, we were mainly rural people. A lot of farmers at the time would have a still, and they would distill or use their excess corn, grains, rye, what have you, and create their own whiskey, either to sell or to trade a neighbor. And if you lived out in the country, you might not have a still, but you had a neighbor who had one. You may trade him a chicken for a bottle of whiskey, what have you. Well, move forward about 100 years or so, and by the late 1800s, the Industrial Revolution came. People were living in cities, and no longer did people either have a still or could go to the farmer down the road, and they had to buy their spirits in the open market. Well, the purveyors of the day were less than scrupulous. Some of them were coloring and flavoring their whiskeys with things like iodine, tobacco, what have you. And the federal government, up until that point, had kind of not cared what the consumer got. They were really more focused on collecting that tax. But they decided they wanted to step in and regulate, to protect the consumer. Normally, the distillers would kind of cringe at any kind of regulation. But what the federal government offered at the time was like, well, if you'll follow our guidelines, we will defer the tax on that spirit. So several distillers stepped up. Most probably to take advantage of that tax break, but some realized the value to their brand, how it would stick out as kind of a symbol of quality, so they agreed to that. Only U.S. spirits will be designated as bonded. You will not see bonded Canadian whiskeys or Scotch whiskeys. It's a truly United States thing. To be a bottled and bond spirit, you have to be distilled in a single season, and when they use the term season, they kind of split the year in half. The first 6 months and the last 6 months, it has to be distilled in that single season at a single distillery by a single distiller. In the past, we only had a few distilleries in this country. A lot of times, so they'd have excess capacity. They may just run that still 3 days a week. Maybe someone comes in the other 2 days. We'll put some of our barrels here, this, that, and the other. Bottle and bond was one distiller, one distillery, and one season. Also, it has to be aged in federally bonded warehouses under the supervision of the U.S. government. If you ever had a federal liquor license, you know that the feds love the ability to be able to come into your premises, snoop around anytime, any day, for any reason. Also, bottle and bond has to be aged at least 4 years and put in the bottle at 100 proof. 100 proof is important because it's kind of a nice round number, and even to this day, how they tax spirits is based off 1 gallon of 100 proof spirit. It'll be X dollars at that 100 proof. If, however, the proof of that spirit is, let's say, 80 proof, they pay 80% of that tax. But the other direction, let's say something like Everclear that's 107, 180 proof, they pay 170 or 180% of that tax. So 100 proof is a nice round number for taxation purposes. The label also must state where this was distilled and where this was bottled, in case it was bottled at a different facility. Sometimes you might have the distillery out in the country and your bottling plant in town. It needed to designate that those are separate facilities. Bottle and bond spirits, bottle and bond bourbons and whiskeys especially, also qualify as straight whiskeys or straight bourbons. You might have heard that term out in our bourbon video where we talked about Jim Beam was a Kentucky straight bourbon. And in other videos I refer to straight whiskey. What a straight whiskey is, it's similar to some of the regulations for bourbon. It cannot be distilled at a higher than 160 proof. It can't go in that barrel under or over 125 proof. Unlike bourbon, which has no minimum age requirement, you could literally dump bourbon in a wood barrel, then dump it back out and bottle it, and that meets the requirement. Straight whiskeys have to be aged a minimum of 2 years. They can be a blend of other straight whiskeys from different distilleries as long as it's from the same state. We talked about the bourbon video at one time. Pretty much Kentucky was where all this was getting distilled, so you really did not have that big of an issue on that. Where straight whiskeys diverge from bottle and bond is straight whiskeys can go in the bottle below 100 proof as low as 80 proof. The example we're going to use today and kind of work our way through to figure out what that label's telling us is Evan Williams Bottle and Bond Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Let's start from the bottom up. Whiskey, we know, is a grain-based distilled beverage that is aged on wood. Bourbon, we know, is American-made, has to be at least from 51% corn, has to be a new oak charred barrel. Where it's similar to straight whiskey, both terms are similar, is we know it's got to be bottled at more than 80 proof, can't go into the barrel at more than 125 proof, can't be distilled at higher than 160 proof. And above that, we have Kentucky. Now, Kentucky is the only state that put its name on a label or say Kentucky Straight Bourbon or Kentucky Straight Whiskey. You will not see a Georgia Straight Whiskey or a Texas Straight Bourbon. Only Kentucky can have that designation. Then above that, we get to Bottle and Bond. Bottle and Bond, we know that this is 100 proof. Straight whiskey told us is at least 2 years old. Bottle and Bond tells us that it's 4 years old, and that we will have the information on this bottle at the back on where this is distilled and bottled at. And we also know Uncle Sam, and we see kind of, this is a replica of the old tax stamps that you would have on bottles if you're a certain age. You remember those as, the tax stamps they always had. We know that Uncle Sam has been to that warehouse and been regulating that. So let's give this Bottle and Bond Spirit a try. Alright, I can tell just because it's a little bit older, we're getting a little more color on that. Woo! That, you can tell the spirit's up a little more, almost a burn on the nose. Let's give her a try. Ooh, that is good. It's got a little kick to it. There's a little warming going on here because we did bump up the proof a little bit. But man, I get a lot of that wood, a lot of the charred notes. Again, 4 years in the barrel. You're tasting a lot of those caramelized, that wood, the vanilla. Boy, got a nice long finish to it. Man, that's some good bourbon. I want to drink me a little more of that. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you need questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.